Today's presenting sponsor of Gambling Mad with Norm and Chad is brought to you by 24K Wellness. Not all nutritional supplements are the same. 24K Wellness makes it their mission to help you feel, perform, and live at your best, naturally and sustainably. 24K Wellness delivers nutritional supplements based on more than 5 decades of experience. Premium, gold standard, natural ingredients with advanced formulations and rigorous quality assurance testing to create products that support energy, recovery, vitality, long-term health, and cognition for focus through stress, late nights, and questionable decisions. No promises on your picks. And right now, special for Gambling Mad listeners only, go to 24kwellness.com and use the code MAD24K for the absolute lowest prices anywhere. Once again, that's 24kwellness.com and use the code MAD24K. 24K Wellness. Fuel better, live better. Tell them Norm sent you.
But let me tell you exactly what he said, verbatim, as that game ended. That's the worst beat of all time. You have to investigate the Raiders. Investigate the Raiders. What the F? That is cheating. What the F? Pete Carroll should be in effing prison. Prison for Pete Carroll. The refs, everybody. This is prison. There's 16 seconds left in the game. The spread's 8.5. They spiked the ball, by the way. They ran up and spiked it. Prison, Pete Carroll. Murder, Pete Carroll. I want Pete Carroll murdered. That was Dave Portnoy. Norm and Chad. Norm and Chad. Welcome to Gambling Mad with Norm and Chad. I am Norm and Chad. Coming up on the program today, the World Cup shouldn't be in the United States. Dave Portnoy shouldn't be betting on sports. And Jim Harbaugh shouldn't be hiring his own assistants. Gambling Mad, as always, brought to you by Fritos, picked fresh off of Central California trees every morning and delivered directly to your local retailer every afternoon. And by the refreshing taste of Fresca. Fritos and Fresca. It's a meal. British philosopher and statesman Francis Bacon once said, "Silence is the sleep which nourishes wisdom." So let me try that for a change of pace. I'm going to close my eyes and be silent the next 10 seconds and see if I can emerge smarter than I am right now. Let's give it a go. Yeah, honestly, I don't think I picked up any wisdom. Let me try something else that might not make me smarter, but might at least relieve some of my building stress over stuff that's happening out there. Not so much. But have you folks looked at the world lately? Have you seen the world we are living in? Deadly gunfire in a college classroom here in the U.S. Deadly gunfire on a Pacific Ocean beach halfway across the world over there. A legendary filmmaker and his wife stabbed to death in their home, and the president gloats over the filmmaker's passing. Everywhere you look, we're consumed by hate and vile and contempt and nastiness and animosity and ugly, shameful, vulgar, heinous, dark, and nauseous words and actions that overwhelm the last shred of decency and humanity among us. But the Steelers beat the Dolphins on Monday Night Football 28-15, so at least there's that. You know, we're supposed to be hosting the most prestigious sporting event in the world, other than the Olympics, the World Cup. We're supposed to be hosting it next year. The president has mentioned more than once that he might move the World Cup away from one or two of the hosting cities, such as Boston or Los Angeles, if they don't meet his standards. But honestly, I'm not so sure we in the United States are up to the standards of the rest of the world. We should not be hosting the World Cup. We don't deserve the World Cup. How can we be hosting the rest of the world when we really don't want the rest of the world here? 8 billion people on Earth, and a lot of them come from shithole World Cup nations. There are 190 plus nations on the planet. Courtesy of the Trump White House, citizens from 19 of those nations, or about 10% of the world's countries, are banned from entering these United States. On the Statue of Liberty, it's famously inscribed, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore." Those words should be scratched out, and it simply should say, don't even think about it. We live in Trump world. The U.S. government now openly stands for bigotry. The president is not only preventing non-whites from immigrating here, he's seeking to toss out legal immigrants already here. He openly disdains the entire third world. He unceasingly blames non-white immigrants for high crime and urban decay. Hey, by the way, do you know what the rest of the world thinks of us? I happened for a number of years to play poker with people from all over. Even before Trump, countless non-Americans would constantly ask me, what is wrong with America? And they mean that in so many different ways, from our gun-obsessed world to the fact that we constantly impose ourselves militarily around the world. To much of the rest of the world, believe it or not, we are an embarrassment. Empathy is out here. Love thy neighbor? No. Hate thy neighbor. I've got mine, you go get yours someplace else. The tech bros, those heartless, soulless crypto kings, now know what is right for all of us. The World Cup, we have no business welcoming the rest of the world here. We are fucked. And I fear that even after I'm dead, I'm going to run into a MAGA maniac 6 feet under who will wake me up and tell me to stop being woke. On the other hand, at least the Bills rallied and beat the Patriots last Sunday 35-31. It was a humdinger. The National Football League once said gambling was terrible. And of course, the NFL now lives, eats, and breathes gambling. The NFL now says prediction markets such as Kalshi and Polymarket are terrible. Prediction markets, of course, are simply sports gambling thinly disguised. But the NFL is not sleeping with these strange bedfellows yet, so it told Congress this past week that it's troubled by their newfangled sports contracts offered in states in which sports betting has not been legalized. The NFL, they always crack me up. You wouldn't think Roger Goodell has a sense of humor, but they're funny people. For years, the league pretended to distance itself from sports betting, saying that gambling would impinge on the integrity of the game, all the while benefiting from all the wagering activity on its product. But when sports betting was legalized in most of the United States, the NFL embraced it, saying that it would join its customers on this front because it would provide a better fan experience. So now NFL teams cut deals with Las Vegas sports books and the likes of DraftKings and FanDuel to get a piece of the pie. But the NFL doesn't have a piece of the prediction market pie yet, so that pie is the devil until it's not. As I have stated repeatedly here on Gambling Mad, I'm rather suspicious on a number of fronts about prediction markets, but we'll leave that for another day. The prediction markets are pretending to be something they are not, and that's for the courts to decide. Today, we're going to deal just a little more directly with the NFL. I want to concentrate on the NFL and make a suggestion that I have made before, half seriously. If I'm an NFL owner, I shouldn't just be content to benefit from gambling. I might like to get an actual piece of the sports book market. Why should others profit off the backs of the sweat of our players? Well, they don't really care about the players. Why should others make book on our product? To this end, whether it's Las Vegas books, online sites, or prediction markets, I humbly suggest that the NFL, if it can find the legal path, the NFL should simply cut out the middleman and run its own sports book. Woo! The NFL, this is such a profit monger if they could do this. They could monitor and regulate more of the betting activity with its own operation, providing guardrails against any illicit stuff. The NFL, a financial behemoth, could then, if it wants to, it can undercut the competition and offer NFL gamblers better lines, better lines on the games, better props, less juice, less vig taken off than the others, and more perks. Imagine if the NFL had an awards program for its gambling customers, like the airlines or Starbucks do for their frequent flyers and frequent coffee drinkers. They could offer rewards no one else can. NFL merch, tickets to NFL games, dinners with NFL coaches and players, and so on. If the NFL were smart, it would lure legendary sportsbook impresario Jimmy Vaccaro out of retirement to run its gambling operation. If Vaccaro doesn't want it, heck, I will take the job. Well, I don't think I'm qualified, but I could use the income, and I would just call Jimmy Vaccaro, every couple of days and ask him for some advice. Now, with more people having more action on every NFL play, more attention, unfortunately, is paid to the officiating. The word rigged gets thrown around a lot. Conspiracy theories run wild. Everybody thinks their team or their bet gets screwed. Most of the time, frankly, it's just everyday human error if an official makes a mistake. But I do find it curious that with replay as an officiating tool and the NFL Replay Review Center taking center stage more and more, we don't know who is actually sitting. We don't know who's actually sitting in that command center at league headquarters, 345 Park Avenue, New York, making these in-game decisions. We know the officials on the field. We can see the officials on the field. In the interest of full transparency, shouldn't we know who is in that Midtown Manhattan supervisory office? Doesn't transparency ward off conspiracy? Would we have 9 justices on the Supreme Court who were totally anonymous? I mean, this is a no-brainer. If I could think of it, it's a no-brainer. Games are won and lost. Bets are won and lost based on whoever's sitting in New York sometimes with maybe the final word. I guess it's not an issue until one day it will be an issue. I'm just spitballing here. So this is probably not true, but let's just say, well, what if Tom Brady's father or Patrick Mahomes' mom has been hanging out in that command center on Sundays for the last several years, for the last 5, 10, 15 years? Would that be a problem? Oh, it might be a problem. Darn right it would be a problem. We need to know who these anonymous souls are making these decisions at NFL headquarters. Speaking of problems and loud, obnoxious voices and dumb gamblers, Dave Portnoy, the subhuman honcho of Barstool Sample, went scorched earth earlier this month when he lost a $250,000 bet because Pete Carroll had the Las Vegas Raiders kick a field goal on the game's last play in a 34-27 loss to the Denver Broncos. In the immediate aftermath, as he often does, Portnoy videotaped himself with an epic rant. The rant included a lot of F-bombs, so I'm just going to use F instead of the actual word. But let me tell you exactly what he said, verbatim, as that game ended. That's the worst beat of all time. You have to investigate the Raiders. Investigate the Raiders. What the F? That is cheating. What the F? Pete Carroll should be in effing prison. Prison for Pete Carroll. The refs, everybody. This is prison. There's 16 seconds left in the game. The spread's 8.5. They spiked the ball, by the way. They ran up and spiked it. Prison, Pete Carroll. Murder, Pete Carroll. I want Pete Carroll murdered. That was Dave Portnoy, not me. Okay, let me give him the benefit of the doubt. Even if I concede that the Barstool Sample despot is just doing this act for clicks, even if I concede he can't even help himself as one of the worst sports gamblers in modern history who keeps betting on the wrong side, I have to believe it's wrong to publicly call for the death of an NFL coach. Doesn't seem right. Well, Portnoy, who is held up these days as a mainstream voice on American politics, business, and culture by Fox News, was correctly piled on. And to his credit, he did release a statement 24 hours later that read, quote, "We've always been anti-murder here at Barstool. We will continue to be anti-murder," end quote. That seems to be reasonable. Stool Presidente. You know, in my heart, I always felt that Barstool Sample was anti-murder. Time for NFL picks. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully it's not a police car, as I am just trying to dig myself out of my worst handicapping season ever. We went 4-1 last week. Woo-woo! Okay, we're now 22, 26-2 on the season against the point spread. But I'm going to need to finish this regular season the next 3 weeks on a tear to be able to put, Farmer John Bacon back on the table, rather than the cheaper stuff I've had to buy the last few weeks. But here we go. NFL picks for week 15. Hope they're as good as week 14. Bills at Browns. How about these Bills? Down 21-0 at New England, and they win. How about Josh Allen, last year's MVP, and this year he's been better. That recalls for me Paul Newman in 1981. He made absence of malice, and then in 1982 he made the verdict. So now suddenly, because these things change every 45 minutes, people out there somewhere are telling us that the Bills are a Super Bowl favorite. Maybe. But how about this week? Playing the dreadful Browns right after rallying against the Patriots. Are we talking letdown? Of course we are. It happened to me in 1985 when I took Ruth Bader Ginsburg to lunch the week after I took Kathleen Turner to dinner. And even though the Browns have been terrible, they are 4-2 against the spread at home this season. How do I know this? I looked it up on the internet. How hard is that? So I am going to take the Browns as a 10-point underdog. Chiefs at Titans. Some fans are joyful that the Chiefs have finally fallen. It's not as if they were the Yankees or the Celtics, those legacy franchises that are really easy to dislike because they're the Yankees and the Celtics. Let's celebrate these Chiefs. They just finished one of the best stretches in pro football history up through last season. Okay, there were the Cleveland Browns, 1949 to 1955, making the league title game 7 straight years and winning 4 titles. There were the New England Patriots, 2011 to 2018. They made the AFC Championship game 8 straight years with 5 Super Bowl appearances and 3 titles. And now the Kansas City Chiefs, 2018 to 2024, making the AFC Championship game 7 straight years with 5 Super Bowl appearances and also 3 titles. Very impressive. And let me just talk for a moment to my man, Patrick Mahomes. Terrible injury he suffered. Non-contact. My usual gambling mad partner, my prized Pit Mix Blue, tore an ACL in her left hind leg. She had surgery last week. She will be back here with us in just a couple of months. Patrick, you can rehab and rebound that quickly too. As for this game this week against the Titans, my goodness, Tennessee might have the better quarterback right now. It's Cam Ward versus Gardner Minshew. He's got the better mustache. Cam Ward might have the better arm. I'm going to take the awful Titans getting 3.5 points. Time for the Colander game of the week.
That was easy.
All right. Bengals at Dolphins. Both teams stunk up the joint last week. The Bengals lost to the Ravens 24-0. The Dolphins were losing to the Steelers 28-3 in the fourth quarter before Tua said, oh, it's Monday Night Football? Let's go. Okay, but what happened to the Bengals? How do you ever shut out Joe Burrow? Was he only throwing left-handed passes? Was he not playing with a helmet? Was he given a blindfold and a cigarette before every third down play? It looked as if the Bengals started their offseason a month early, and now they have a vacation week of sorts. They go to South Florida. It's mojito time, baby. I recall back, I guess this was 1998 or 99. I had a work conference in Miami, and I didn't make it to a single seminar for 5 days. I think her name was Sophia. I'm taking the Dolphins and 1.5 points in this one. Buccaneers at Panthers. This game has huge playoff implications. Why? Because someone from the NFC South has to go to the playoffs. The Buccaneers lost to the Falcons last week, and the Panthers lost to the Saints. And somehow the Bucs and the Panthers are playing for first place. If they were in the NFC North or the NFC West, they might be playing for last place. My goodness, not only has Tampa Bay lost 5 of its last 6, the Buccaneers have lost twice to the 4-10 Saints during that span. My usual man, Baker Mayfield, I don't even think he's watching game film anymore. He's just watching his TV commercial highlights. Meanwhile, can Carolina quarterback Bryce Young win a big game? We will see. Anyway, the Panthers have covered 11 straight times as an underdog after a loss. How do I know that? I looked it up on the internet. How hard is that? I will take the Panthers plus 3 points. 49ers at Colts, Monday Night Football. Sure, this Phillip Rivers story in Indianapolis is wonderful. Out of football for 5 years, and now a starting quarterback at age 44. For crying out loud, he's a grandfather, and he almost won in Seattle last week. But did you watch the game? Rivers is a bit out of shape. He's got that little stomach punch that I'm very familiar with, okay? The Colts' longest offensive play of the game was 17 yards. Phillip Rivers, he has no arm strength. He has no mobility. Let's be realistic. He is 44 years old and hasn't been in training for 5 years. There are a lot of other 44-year-olds out there with great skill sets. Beyonce, Britney Spears, Jake Gyllenhaal, Meghan Markle, Ivanka Trump. And I wouldn't let a single one of them throw a pass in the National Football League. Meanwhile, how about the 49ers' Christian McCaffrey? What a workhorse. Number 1 in touches per game in the NFL, 24.6, and he is 3rd overall in scrimmage yards. How do I know this? I looked it up on the internet. How hard is that? 49ers, they're given 6 points. I will give the 6 points. Since they already have name recognition, you might think sports figures would dive into politics more often. When I was a kid, I remember AFL quarterback Jack Kemp. He went from a Buffalo Bill throwing passes to passing bills in Buffalo. But there haven't been that many sports stars turned national leaders. Kemp, Bill Bradley, Jim Bunning, Tom McMillan, Steve Largent, J.C. Watts, Heath Schuler, all were elected to Congress. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jesse Ventura became governors. NBA stars Dave Bing and Kevin Johnson became big city mayors. Well, this year, as the real world descends into madness, the sports world is stepping up in record numbers trying to make its way to Washington. Are ex-jocks the solution? Well, could they do any worse? Actually, I guess they could. Herschel Walker nearly became a senator. So this year, former NFL kicker Jay Feely running for a House seat in Arizona. Former MLB All-Star first baseman Mark Teixeira is running for a House seat in Texas. Former Tennessee football coach Derek Dooley running for the U.S. Senate in Georgia. Former NBA first-round draft pick Royce White running for the U.S. Senate in Minnesota. All of those sports folk I just mentioned, incidentally, happen to be Republicans for whatever that's worth. And it doesn't just stop here with those jocks. Sports media figures are now angling for a new platform from which to blather. Longtime NFL sideline reporter Michelle Tafoya is considering a run for the same U.S. Senate seat in Minnesota that Royce White is contending for. ESPN college football analyst Paul Feinbaum has talked about a run for the U.S. Senate seat in Alabama that's being vacated by former Auburn football coach Tommy Tuberville, who is now running for governor of the state. Which brings us to the biggest and baddest news of all. I wanted to drop
The obsessive killing of Dorothy Stratton, the real-life murder that inspired Twin Peaks. These stories and more are told in the Hollywoodland podcast, where true crime and Tinseltown collide. Follow and listen to Hollywoodland wherever you get your podcasts.
drum roll. Thank you. The biggest and baddest sports yacker of this century, ESPN's insufferable Stephen A. Smith, continues to weigh a run for the White House. Yeah, that White House. The one that Donald Trump might voluntarily vacate when his second term expires in 2029. Why wouldn't Stephen A. Smith run for president? On any given day, he can name almost every NFL starting quarterback. But does SAS, does he have the backing of the American people? Could he actually win? Now, let's go over to the big national map and dive into it a little bit more. If Stephen A. Smith runs for president in 2028, where might his greatest pockets of support be? Well, we're going to take a look at the latest ABC News Washington Post polling, which indicates that, for instance, in New York City, 2 of Stephen A.'s 4 sisters indicate they might consider voting for their brother. Meanwhile, Stephen A. currently lives in North Jersey, and he says that he indeed will vote for himself if he runs for president. Meanwhile, Stephen A. took a fortuitous vacation last year to Hawaii, to the island of Maui, and in Maui got a good relationship with the Four Seasons Hotel bartender, and he indicates he too might consider voting for Stephen A. Right now, those are the largest pockets of support for his presidential candidacy. The margin, plus minus margin for error here is about one person. One footnote that if the current president gets his wish and mail-in ballots are banned, then the people of Phoenix, Arizona will not be able to go to the polls. It'll just be too damn hot. Today, a scorching 108 degrees in Phoenix in the middle of the winter. Hey, traffic and weather on the 5s all weekend long. Let's go back to the desk.
Sex, murder, the magic of the movies. You Must Remember This is a podcast about the secret and forgotten histories of 20th century Hollywood. Follow and listen to You Must Remember This on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
I just returned from nearly a week in the Bahamas. See my tan line? I was there working. Yeah, I was working. World Series of Poker. Had a series of events there. And I was there. And I played one of the tournaments. It was a $10,000 buy-in. And it reminded me of how screwed up tournament poker is right now. For those of you who don't familiar about it, when you play a tournament in poker, everyone pays the same entry fee. Then everyone gets the same amount of tournament chips, which are like Monopoly chips. Once you run out of the chips, you are eliminated. The entire prize pool is comprised of the players' entry fees. You know, there's no tournament sponsors like you have in the PGA or bowling or tennis and all that. You got to pay it out of your own pocket. So let's say there's 100 players who put up the fee. Only, say, 15% of them make money. The first 85 that are eliminated get nothing. And then the top 15 carve up the rest of that prize pool. You know, you finish 15th, 14th, or 13th. You don't make that much money. You got to finish really high up, first, second, or third, to make a lot of money. So that's the way it works. But then they made a couple of changes. First of all, they decided, and understandably, they decided that, people are busy, people have jobs, this, that, and the next thing, that you didn't have to start at the beginning of the tournament to enter it. It used to be everyone had to be there at the same time, and then you go, like a 100-meter race or whatever. But they decided, okay, we'll let people in later. And they set a cutoff on that, but they let you come in later than the starting time. You pay the same entry fee, and you get those starting chips, which, of course, because the limits keep going up during the course of a tournament, when you get those starting chips a little later on, they're not worth as much because now the limits are getting really high, so you don't have as many starting chips as you would have had technically at the beginning. So you let people show up late. But then they decided, people sometimes got to go a long way through traffic or planes or whatever to get to this tournament. If they get knocked out early, what are they supposed to do? Well, sure, they got eliminated, but just give us more entry money. We'll let you back in. We'll give you another starting stack. And they decide just one time's not enough. You get knocked out a second time. Just give us more money. We'll let you back in with the same starting stack. And sometimes it's unlimited reentry for a long period of time before we get down to the cash. Sometimes you can get knocked out 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm not making this up, 9 or 10 times. And each time they say, you're not really eliminated. Give us more money. We'll put you back in. Okay, there's no equivalent to these two things anywhere else in sports. Let's just pretend poker's a sport for a moment. Okay, you can't enter a golf tournament, for instance, starting on the 4th hole. If you lose at Wimbledon, you don't write them a check and they put you back into the bracket. Let's say you're at the Olympics, you're shot put, okay? You had 3 lousy shot puts. Well, take out some money and they'll give you 3 more shot puts and see if you can, better your distance. None of that ever happens. But in poker, it's different. And so I'm in a tournament, and let's tell you how it happens now with the fact that you can start late or you can keep re-entering. I'm in a poker tournament that ends up with maybe about 100 people. I'm there the first day. I'm against the best players in the world. They're all better than me. I'm playing most of the first day. That's 7 hours, 7 levels I play. At the end of the first day, there would have been about 60 or 65 people who entered, and about 30 of them were left. So I survived 30 or 35 people, survived about half the field. But then on day 2, they allow new people to enter. They allow you to re-enter if you got busted for the first 3 hours. So when I bust then in the first hour, after beating 35 people or so, somebody who's just entering then comes in, half the field is already busted, and now they only need to survive 30 or 35 people to make it into the money. Now, granted, they have a shorter stack to start with, but they get lucky a couple of times, and they don't have to sit there all day, the first day, trying to grind it out against other players. They just come in late, get lucky a couple of hands, and they're in a position to cash. And they're not surviving any more people to cash than I survived on the first day. It ain't right! And I'm just not talking about myself. This is a problem in poker where, because of the unlimited or multiple reentries, people with a lot of money or people who really care for the trophies can spend all this money to keep just firing away while the amateur and recreational players just sit there with one entry. Let me ask you this. If it's a lottery and one person has 6 tickets and the other person has 1 ticket, who has a better chance of cashing a ticket? The person with 6. Plus, the person with 6 is the better player. They're the rich guy. They're the professional. The person for 1 looks like me with no tan line in the Bahamas. It's got to change, and it won't change. Degen's gonna degen. A 35-year-old American man tried to cross the border from Mexico into Southern California while hiding 2 parakeets in his pants. Jesse Auguste Martinez, a U.S. citizen living in Mexico, heavily sedated the 2 birds and placed them in a brown sack in his crotch area. According to the New York Times, he claimed to customs officials several times that the bulge in his trousers was merely his penis. This, youngsters won't understand this, but this recalls the famous Mae West line, "Is that a parakeet in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?" This was Martinez's 2nd bird infraction this year. In September, he tried to sneak a parrot into the U.S., hiding it in a towel under his arm. This time, customs officers patted down Martinez and found the orange-fronted parakeets in his groin area. The birds are a protected species native to Mexico. Martinez was arrested on federal smuggling charges. If convicted, he could face up to 20 years in prison. The parakeets, by the way, were found unconscious but breathing, and removed in stable condition from Martinez's pants. But, they had to suffer some degree of emotional distress for a variety of reasons, no? I think so. Degen's gonna degen. Before we wrap up, I'm going to say this one time and one time only. Jim Harbaugh can coach football, but he can't judge character. Harbaugh is currently head coach of the NFL's Los Angeles Chargers. Previous to this position, he was head coach at the University of Michigan, won a national title there. Since Harbaugh was hired there in 2015, seven of his staff assistants have been arrested. Denard Robinson, DUI. Steve Klinkscale, DUI. Greg Shrugs, DUI. Jim Minnick, DUI. Sounds like they need more Fresca, less Bud. Fergus Colony, DUI, plus punching a police officer and hitting hospital staff. Matt Weiss, computer hacking and identity theft to download intimate photos and videos of female student athletes. And now Sharon Moore, alleged home invasion, stalking, and breaking and entering after being fired as the head coach at Michigan for an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. I'm thinking maybe Harbaugh might want to interview assistants, call them in for a second or third time before hiring them. Graduates of Michigan, graduates of this cherished Ann Arbor school, love to refer to the qualities of a Michigan man. A Michigan man is a badge of honor, someone who embodies excellence and integrity and toughness, someone who stands for sacrifice and pride in the Michigan program. It also is apparently someone who knows a good defense lawyer. That will do it for another edition of Gambling Mad with Norman Chad. Hope to see you again next time. And remember, if you're going to roll the dice, make sure they're loaded.
Today's presenting sponsor of Gambling Mad with Norman Chad is brought to you by 24K Wellness. Not all nutritional supplements are the same. 24K Wellness makes it their mission to help you feel, perform, and live at your best, naturally and sustainably. 24K Wellness delivers nutritional supplements based on more than 5 decades of experience. Premium, gold standard, natural ingredients with advanced formulations and rigorous quality assurance testing to create products that support energy, recovery, vitality, long-term health, and cognition for focus through stress, late nights, and questionable decisions. No promises on your picks. And right now, special for Gambling Mad listeners only, go to 24kwellness.com and use the code MAD24K for the absolute lowest prices anywhere. Once again, that's 24kwellness.com and use the code MAD24K. 24K Wellness. Fuel better, live better. Tell them Norm sent you.
As I try to relax as much as possible in the final third of my life, I can't say I'm happy about thinking about belts. Yeah, belts. Not seat belts, but old-fashioned pants belts. Never even thought about them growing up. Probably bought my first pants belt sometime in college. Maybe I'd have a black one and or a brown one, or maybe one of those reversible belts, black on one side, brown on the other. And then, I don't know, perhaps 5 or 10 years later, it finally wore out and I'd have to go get another belt. That's the thing. You hardly ever had to buy a belt. They lasted. Of course, I never understood how come most of these belts were made in China or Italy or Mexico. Nothing against those countries, but can't we ever get some local leather? Anyway, these belts no longer last forever. It's bad enough that they cost more. How can they last less? Now, look at this belt. It is falling apart. I bought it just 2 years ago. It was the most I'd ever paid for a belt. Stuff used to be well made. Now stuff is made to last, 15 minutes. It's just a belt, not a dishwasher or a refrigerator or automobile. There's no complex engineering feat in making a quality leather belt. Disposable razors, I get that, but disposable belts? I'm asking for help here, and we all know I need help. If there is a belt manufacturer, if there's a belt manufacturer within the sound of my voice, I am begging for your mercy. Please manufacture a leather belt that costs less than $75 and lasts longer than 75 days, or I will go gambling mad!
Gambling Mad with Norman Chad is written by Norman Chad and ghost-written by Norman Chad. Executive producers are John Scheinberg and Rick Barrio-Dill. Produced by Norman Chad and Rick Barrio-Dill. Our associate producers are Bree Khoury and Asher Friedberg, and edited by Asher Friedberg with studio facilities at 360 Pod Studios, Beverly Hills.
I'm Claire Fallon.
And I'm Emma Gray.
We are friends and reality dating show fans, and the only thing we love as much as love stories is lovingly snarking on them.
Whether you love or love to hate it, listen to Love to See It, our podcast dissecting all the romance we see on screen.
From reality dating shows like The Bachelor and Love is Blind to classic rom-coms like You've Got Mail, we recap in obsessive detail and unpack all the weird messages they send us about love, sex, and dating.
Listen to Love to See It on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.